Hello, I did scenario 4, domestic call. There was a call from the neighbor Gabriel Johnson at 222 Manor Drive. He reported loud yelling and commotion coming from the side residency at 220, and the residence occupant is Macy Green. He also heard 2 gunshot fires coming from the home. When police arrived, there was a green pickup truck sitting in the driveway. Everything in the house upon entry had been thrown about, looking as if there had been some kind of physical altercation and incident. The victim in this case, Macy Green, was lying on the floor, naked and crying, saying that Mitchell Gardner, her boyfriend, had raped her and fired 2 gunshots at her. But he was not on scene and had fled on foot, and when walking through the home, there was a baby found crying in an adjoining room. So the crime here is going to be attempted murder because of the gun use being fired at the victim. There's rape. I have unlawful use of a firearm within the home because he fired the gun into the wall, and I also have a child abuse and neglect case because of the lack of attention to the fact that he just fired aimlessly into a wall with a baby sitting in another room. So I want all of these charges because later they can either be dismissed but it'll be something to hold the suspect on. My witness in this case is the neighbor. It is Gabriel Johnson, born 10/01/1955. He's a white male. He has observed the behavior of both the victim and the suspect throughout the day, as well as overheard the commotion in the home, reporting the call. So it'll be important to get his statement, and in this case I will be interviewing him in sort of a technical approach. I want the who, what, when, where, and how, so I can help build off of this so I can get all of those basic facts. While my victim is in the hospital getting checked out, my suspect in this case is the boyfriend. He's a white male. He's 6'2", about 175 to 185 pounds. He is muscular in build. He has black hair and blue eyes. He also has distinguished tattoos on his body. He was reported to have fled from scene on his motorcycle, which is a Yamaha FJR 1300A model. It's distinguished, it's like sort of distinct in color. It's a custom paint job, so there aren't too many out there, and that'll help pinpoint him if driving around. It's silver in color, and it also has blue tribal and certain kinds of tribal decals put on the tank of the motorcycle. The suspect in this case is apprehended at his mother's home later and taken in for interviewing, and he will have more of a structured interview. So I'm going to approach him with trying to build a rapport with him, try to get his side of the story. I want him to feel comfortable with talking to me. I don't want him to feel like he's being interrogated yet. I want to ask open-ended questions, giving him the chance to talk and to build my interrogation questions based off of what he says in the interview, as well as being able to collect the forensic evidence to then reapproach him if it is found that he had in fact raped and physically accosted his girlfriend in their home on that night. The suspect, when I look up his record, he's got a background and a history of domestic issues. He also has issues with authority. He's sort of narcissistic in his personality, and I think like when you build off of the characteristics of your suspect, that it will play a big deal in your interrogation. So in this case, through the basic interviewing of my witness alone, I learned that the suspect is very violent when he drinks. It's a common thing that the victim in this case did. Her statement of him being drunk and trying to drive the baby around was supported by my witness, who has also observed this and heard the incident earlier in the day as reported. That the two of them argued, and both of them share the same during the interview. He claims that the two of them had argued because he tried to take the baby out for a bike ride and on the motorcycle just within the yard, but this sort of enraged him, and he said that he also observed the suspect in this, Mitchell Gardner, drinking heavily throughout the day. He can't necessarily recall, but he did notice a majority of a large 18 case of beer to have been consumed and possibly liquor, but he couldn't verify what the liquor was. He just knew it was liquor. He also says that he is the reason why most of the domestic calls have happened in the past, that he's the one who reports them or overhears commotion and therefore calls on behalf of the victim because she doesn't call herself. Though nothing is ever done about it because of failure to comply from the victim and with the courts, the suspect is often let go and nothing ever really happens. So he has like this very arrogant that he's gotten away with it, so there's that superiority and he feels like he's like got that God complex. He claimed he can help substantiate the time in this case of when he heard the gunshots to also when that way when police arrive there's like a timeline, so he helps build a slight timeline to when certain things had happened. He can substantiate that based on the fact that he remembers watching the news and then he heard the gunshots at a certain time, so you help build that timeline of events so you can help go at the suspect when he claims or doesn't claim that he did something, or even if he confesses. You're trying to support or you're trying to dismiss fact from fiction in this. When I interview my other witness, which is Macy Green, well, the victim, she will have I'll go at her sort of with a structured interview process too, but I want to do the same thing. I want to build a rapport, but maybe in a more sensitive way. You don't want to scare your victim and you don't want to make them feel at fault, so it's really important that you do that. Her claims are that she had told earlier the suspect that he could not take the baby out for a motorcycle ride because he was drinking. When they came in after arguing, things seemed to settle down, but he was still very tense. When she sort of dismissed his sexual advances, he became enraged and then physically accosted her in their home, and there's supporting evidence. He had broke her necklace, ripped her dress. There's physical markings on there, which later he'll dismiss in his own statement, but when I interview the suspect, he dismisses it, saying that it was their way of playing out a bondage disciplines type of sexual lifestyle. And the suspect in this is very arrogant about it, but you don't want him to feel that you're judging him, so it's really important to stay open to the facts that this could be that case and that she may have gotten out of hand. Not that it doesn't not that the rape didn't happen, but to not dismiss the fact that they may have a sexual practice outside of the norm. So when I do go to interrogate my suspect, I'm going to bring at him the facts that I can support the fact that he raped her. It was not a consensual act. Through vaginal tearing as well as the anal tearing that was said to be reported by the suspect, that he had forced her to do certain sexual acts that were against her will, that he says that were of a consensual act based on sexual fetish practices that they both participated in. But the evidence supports the fact that this was non-consensual. It was too brutal. There was too much bruising and ligature marks on the, or not ligature marks, but there was too many bruising as well as the marks left from him physically holding her down that would not support a consent act. In this case, there was also semen present, so therefore you could use that evidence. But the interrogation would be based off of my interview. I would show him and try to dismiss his account with real physical evidence, because he is so arrogant and he does feel that he's gotten away with so much that it'd be just important to sort of go at him a bit harder, but not to give him too much so he can back out. I wouldn't expect this person to confess because of it, so I wouldn't be hoping that he would confess. I would just hope that he would give me enough that through his own demise through his own conversation, that he would hang himself in this instance. And that's what he would have done, because there's enough evidence to support, such as like the bullet, which he says was an accidental shooting, that he didn't mean to do it, but we can't ever recover a gun. So if it's an accident, why is the gun missing? And why was it in the close proximity to the person when you said you were sitting next to her? But then again, through forensic analysis, that your person would have had been standing above her and firing in a downward motion. It's things like that you want to like pay attention to. It's sort of like in the details of things. In this case, there were many things that we just like you would be able to find, I created it, but just to help support the victim's testimony as being truthful and the suspects as not, and you just let them do the talking. I think it's really important to do open-ended and to do your interview in an open way that people are willing to share their information, and then the interrogation process. So I think the biggest thing here is the ethical part, as well. Legal is important, but ethically you want to make sure that you don't give off that feeling, especially if the victim is into a different sexual lifestyle. You don't want to close them off to making them feel ashamed. So making sure you remain open-minded and that you remain open to the fact that other people do practice different things, but that doesn't constitute the fact that they can't be victims, and to write them off. And that also falls, I think, into the legal, is you can't write that off as like, okay, they practice this type of thing, so then that makes it so where the suspect had the right to do it, or not the right, but then there's no real allegation, like she can't claim that she was raped, and then you just let him go, because then the victim could become a victim again. And even if a person does participate in something outside of like social norms, that they get the same treatment as anybody else. And that's one of the things that I would run into in this case, is that people don't close off their investigation because they view somebody else's practices as being outside of it, and that they probably caused it themselves by not doing something or fighting back or whatnot. But I think that they both sort of come into play during the interrogation, that you find like, oh, they do this, and so you just close it off. There's also the fact that during the interrogation that you would read, because you have such strong evidence, that you make sure you read Miranda to the suspect in this case, because of the fact that you are probably going to arrest him in the end. I'm getting on to 13 minutes, so I want to make sure I cover all the bases here. I think that it's important too that you don't give up too much fact, because if it didn't happen and then you're giving fact to somebody, and then or leading them into stating something that is not true, or what has not happened, that you don't force a person into giving up something. A person has a right to not incriminate themselves, so you don't have to expect that in some cases. But in this case, that's my biggest thing, is I would read Miranda, be very open-ended, be open-minded. I wouldn't want to dismiss somebody else's accounts for what they experienced as being rape, and trying to say, well, because you practice this, that it's not, because that's not always the case. A person has a right to say no, and if they don't say no, it doesn't mean that it's not rape. So in this case, my suspect doesn't confess, but I have enough physical evidence to support the allegations of which to go forward, and that's what I would do. Thank you.